listening to Bijou Banter on KRUI, Iowa City. Bijou Banter is a show dedicated to discussing films, showing locally at Film Scene. In our final segment, we'll be discussing this year's Oscar nominees for Best Animated Short Films, which offer an array of styles and stories in what is perhaps the most creative category of the Academy Awards. In The Bigger Picture, two adult brothers begin to resent one another as they care for their aging mother. In The Dam Keeper, an anthropomorphic pig is teased mercilessly despite the fact that, with tireless devotion to his work, he keeps the entire village safe from an encroaching fog of grime and gloom. In Me and My Molten, a 7-year-old Norwegian girl and her two sisters ask their unconventional parents for a bicycle and wait, with a mix of anticipation and skepticism, for the desired bike to arrive. In Feast, an adorable dog enjoys the good life of junk food table scraps from his bachelor master. And finally, in A Single Life, a young woman experiences the strange effects of a time-traveling record player. It accomplishes little, however, to describe merely the subject of these films, given the amazing variety in visual style, soundtrack composition, narration, and even length of these films. For example, A Single Life and Feast are computer-animated shorts, whereas The Dam Keeper and Me and My Molten utilize disparate styles of hand-drawn animation, and The Bigger Picture blends 2D paintings with 3D stop-motion. Furthermore, Feast, A Single Life, and The Dam Keeper are non-dialogue films, while Me and My Molten relies on expository narration, and The Bigger Picture is propelled forward with only terse snippets of dialogue. Finally, at 18 minutes, the longest of the 5 films is The Dam Keeper, while A Single Life flies by in just 2 minutes. Peter, I'm eager to know which of these 5 films left the strongest impression on you and why, and I'm curious, of course, to know how your work as an animator influences how you respond to these films.
That's a good question. I really liked Feast when I saw it before Big Hero 6. I thought it was brilliant. Just seeing the progression and all of the nuances from the different types of food and how it documents his owner as going through that process of being in a relationship and then what ends up happening and all that. I thought that was a really nice piece. It is 3D animated, but it looks like it's a 2D animation, and I think that is another nice element in how they were more or less going back to their roots. And the style I thought was really nice.
Can you explain the difference between 3D animation and 2D animation?
Well, usually you can tell based on the camera move. So when the camera moves and rotates around an object, that's how you know it's pretty much a 3D piece. And there's a lot of elements in that are done that way. And then what happens after that is a process called toon shading. So there's different ways you can do it to make it look like it's hand-drawn or it looks like a painting. If you remember Paperman, that's a similar technique, although I believe they ended up drawing over top of the 3D, which ended up making it longer and more difficult. Whereas like the Blue Umbrella is looks like it's photoreal, looks like it's video, but in fact it's entirely 3D animated. So that's hopefully that gives some insight.
But so when you say 3D, you're not when you're talking about computer animation, you're not talking about a physical object that's 3D, are you?
Well, what I mean by 3D animation is that it's done on a computer, and the software you can manipulate the objects in all 3 axes.
Oh, okay.
The end product is still on a 2-dimensional screen, whether it's a TV, a computer monitor, or your phone. It's still going to end up on a 2D surface.
And I feel like that's only getting more confusing for me now that 3D films are becoming such you can go see the box trolls in 3D, but that's not the same thing as saying it's 3D animated or 2D animated.
That's right. It's not the same. That's a stereoscopic process.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I absolutely, I'm so know nothing about technology,
okay.
So that was great for me.
No, that was helpful.
Yeah.
No problem.
But but my personal favorite here is actually, I like Face a lot, but I like The Dam Keeper better. Just the simplicity.
Really?
Because, yeah. And it's a interesting moral tale about bullying.
I thought it was too moralizing, personally.
Yeah.
Ah.
I agree.
It was also too long.
It was quite long.
The visual style of it was very impressive. That they would draw it and then make it look like it was, I don't know, a little bit of pastel or some sort of dry media. And the characters are quite interesting and cute. It kind of raises the question of, metaphorically, why would you use these animals and not use humans? Which, I don't know. The other thing, too, about the dam keeper is like, what exactly is his job? I was confused. And then towards the end with what ends up happening is like, what is this? And and it just ended on I don't know. It was just aesthetically very beautiful. Very beautiful. But it left me wondering with more questions. And then I guess I wasn't very satisfied after, that 18 minutes.
Well, that's true, I would say. I mean, in a sense, you can see the ending or the fog as a certain kind of darkness descending upon the world. But I mean, you can also say that, well, it is very, in a certain sense, environmentally conscious. Like, oh, it's about air pollution or whatnot. But like, I'm over interpreting here. But still,
I thought it was just like a metaphor for the people in the world that do the jobs that no one else wants to do, and how perpetually ungrateful we tend to be about that, and how we would prefer not to know about either the job or the person who tends to that job daily.
I was thinking about the high school bullying and then the reaction, how he went to try to save the people. Mm-hmm. However, in some different cases, when he put the mask on, I felt that as a metaphor for the shootings that happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I hadn't even
with bullying or the violence that occurs with it. That's how I thought.
Because he's sort of there's this turn where like his anger takes over and he's not exactly. Yeah.
I hadn't even read it that way, but that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was what I was taking away from it. That this was like kind of a parable of bullying and violence and all of that.
But what is your favorite?
Yeah, what's your favorite, Catherine?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that maybe between Feast and A Single Life. I loved both of those. Feast was really cute. I thought A Single Life was like for how short it is, it's brilliant. It's just such a simple concept and so brilliant. I think that's probably my favorite. Although I think that The Bigger Picture was super fascinating as far as technique to me. I thought that was really I was super fascinated with that technique more than any of the other ones. The kind of partial painted backgrounds and the stop motion animation I thought was really.
That was apparently life-size stop motion. So
wow.
Which I didn't even know that was a thing. Which it makes that even more fascinating, that style. God, it's funny because my favorite was Me and My Molten. So I think we've covered them all, actually. And I liked that because I think I've said this before. It reminded me of children's storybooks where the illustrations have like extra details in them where even though you're following the story of the girls and the bike, like there's always something different happening with the cat in the corner. Like the cat's having its own plot line, or like there's all these cute
I never
little
noticed a cat.
These cute sort of details that are happening as the story progresses. So moving on, as I mentioned earlier, 3 of the 5 films are classified as non-dialogue, which we haven't even really touched on, meaning that there's no sort of back and forth conversations in those films. But it would be a mistake to underplay the importance of the soundtrack in these films. Not only does the music often play a crucial role in the narrative, A Single Life being the kind of prime example of that, but also the sound effects are so vivid they almost harken back to the Foley artists of radio dramas in the early 1900s. Do you think that more attention is paid to sound effects in animated films than in live action, or are we just noticing them more because there is maybe less dialogue? Do you have any thoughts on that, Peter? What do you do when you're thinking about sound effects?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're creating this this world that you see. You can decide how things sound. And so a lot of times you may not even have like the luxury in video production. You have the luxury of picking out sounds that are already there based on the background noise. However, in 3D, there is no music, there is no sound, there's nothing. And so all you have is that moving image, and then you have to come up with your own interpretation based on your reality, because as a director, you have to come up with something that hopefully is personal to you. And so there are certain elements that I think for my work that I find to be important, and I'll put those in to emphasize so that way the audience can pick up on certain beats or certain notes to drive the narrative a little bit. But to go back to these pieces, they're more or less all dramas. And when you're dealing with dramas, the soundtrack is so important because you're trying to create this artificial feeling, because you're looking at cartoons, right? And so you're trying to grab the audience in a way using music and sound effects to make them feel like these characters are real, that you're in their realities. And that is why I think there's such a strong emphasis to music and sound effects in these 5 pieces. I mean, just to go back to, I'm going to rant a little more, if you guys don't mind.
Go for it.
You know, Disney was so big on symphonies and music in his works. So you can kind of see that from an American standpoint, from back from the 30s and 40s, how it's still very relevant and important. I know some of the works are from overseas, but there's such a strong American influence in animation, especially in the Academy Awards, that we see that right throughout all 5 animated works, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Catherine and Jungmin, I don't know, did you notice the sound in particular as well, or have any thoughts about that?
I definitely noticed the sound quite a bit in Feast because of all of the kind of visceral slurping sounds and the different chewing noises and the whining of the dog. And my dog, who was sitting next to me while I was watching Feast, definitely noticed and started whining in response to the dog whining on the computer screen. So I think it was very realistic in that way. Definitely caused a response from its demographic. But I think I noticed that one kind of first and foremost, just because of all of those really particular eating noises that I'm so familiar with as a human being who eats a lot. Anyway.
Well, I feel like I failed as a PhD student in film studies at Iowa because we are famous for sound studies for, 2 decades or what. So, but I mean, I didn't really pay any attention to any of the sound effects of these films. But when I was watching Fist, all I can think about is, oh my God, this animation short is sending the wrong messages. You shouldn't feed your dog.
I know. I kind of thought that too. I was like worried that the dog was going to get sick, and I was like, where's this going?
Yeah.
I mean, they are going to get like kidney problems.
Going back to this note about how American animation has influenced animation generally, Peter, I was surprised that these shorts, all 5 of the nominees, they come from either the US, Canada, the UK, and the Netherlands, those particular 5. And that's surprising given that even just on this show, anytime that we've talked about animation, all 3 films that we talked about last semester came from Japan when we talked about Takahata's films and Ghost in the Shell. Why is it specific to the Academy Awards that they'd be influenced by more Western European American animation? And why is that? Or is it just because it's in Hollywood? Or
yeah, it is very heavily influenced. I think sometimes we forget that stuff that's coming from Asia is often outsourced. So a lot of the studios in Asia are outsourced studios, and they are just more or less told, what to do. So go animate this. We want this kind of acting. And so when they have the opportunity to make their own work, sometimes they are left wondering, well, what do I do? And then they are, let's say there's some investors. I'm going all business here, but there's investors that say, hey, can you do this story? It's a childhood story of mine. when I was a kid, and it was a old parable from, maybe it's a religious piece or whatnot, or a historical piece, and that doesn't really relate to, I think, the audiences here on the West so much. There's a lot of great animation that's coming out of there, but it is either not particular to the Western audience, or it is lacking in originality, unfortunately, because of the nature of these studios being essentially outsourced studios. So one particular example I can think of is Monk Studio. It's a studio in Thailand. They produced this short called Nine, a really nice piece, and it's all a parable based on story. I mean, in terms of the production quality and the story itself, I thought, it could have been in this short list, but it wasn't. So I think it goes back to the idea that the Academy has a particular taste for dramas, for this 2D look. And so, Asia loves bells and whistles, explosions, lights. They love all this fancy, bright stuff. The Academy Awards don't care how that smoke is billowing up and how it maybe affects a character and how it kind of is rendered. They're more interested in this drama and about learning about the human element more.
Oh, that's interesting. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and when we'll return, we'll continue our discussion with Peter Chanthanacone about the Oscar nominees for Best Animated Shorts.
Underwriting support for CareUI is provided in part by IC Glass Recycling, a door-side recycling service for Iowa City homes and apartments designed to supplement the curbside program already in place. IC Glass Recycling provides reusable bags for you to store your recyclables in and picks them up on a regularly scheduled pickup day. For more information, go to www.iowacityglass.com.
Welcome back to Bijou Banter on KRUI Iowa City. This is a show dedicated to discussing films showing locally at Film Scene. We're currently discussing the Oscar nominees for Best Animated Shorts with Peter Chanthanacone. So Film Scene will be screening 4 additional animated shorts along with the 5 nominated films, whose total running time would only be about 45 minutes if they just showed those 5. These 4 extra films, Sweet Cocoon, Footprints, Duet, and Bus Story, are runners-up, I guess, in a sense. I'm wondering if anyone preferred one of these so-called highly commended films to one of the nominees.
Do you have one?
Actually, no. I think I liked all 5 of the nominees more than those 4. Not that they didn't have merit, but...
Yeah, I was a little surprised too. I mean, not to say, they're very beautiful to look at. And I was a little taken away because there's so many good animated short films that they could have picked, and I thought, man, they really dropped it. There's so much good stuff out there, and they picked these 4, and I thought, oh.
I liked Footprints. I think that was my favorite of the 4 runners-up.
Bill Plimpton, is that his name?
No, it's not that one, is it? Or is it? I don't remember.
I think it's Bill Plimpton.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, the
animator.
The animator.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I liked that one, and I thought it was funny and interesting. But I do think that the main ones are kind of head and shoulders for the most part above the other 3.
Well, all of these runners up are kind of weird. They all have their internal conflicts that cannot be solved one way or another. For example, Sweet Cocoon. When I was watching that film, I was like, what? I just cannot. What are you? It is a bad idea to tell a story about a caterpillar. And it's a worse idea to depict a caterpillar transformed into a butterfly being snatched away by a bird.
Yeah, it's
a tragedy.
It kind of felt like a student. I think it is a student work, but I just thought, man.
And it has a certain kind of plastic look, which is very, very weird.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, the animation is good, the rendering is good, you know, but yeah, I just like, really?
And also, isn't that oh gosh, I want to say that's like a minor plot line in Fox and the Hound, maybe? Like, I feel like I've seen a Disney animated, not that this is Sweet Cocoon is Disney, but I've seen an animated caterpillar turn into a butterfly before.
Yeah.
So even just that in and of itself, I was like, well.
Well, just going back to what you were saying earlier about like the nostalgic of animation, it is becoming harder and harder to entertain us and for us to find something that we like. And if you were to look back and say 10 years ago, what's it called, Sweet Cocoon? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it would have won plenty of awards. But now that we're comparing it to everything that's been around, it's going to be tough. We're a tough audience.
Yeah, that's true. Can we go back to something you were talking about earlier, Peter, about audiences and perhaps maybe the Academy as an audience or the U.S. as an audience wanting to see the human element, I think is the way that you described it. Are you speaking particularly to animated films, or are you just saying that's generally the Hollywood taste, even if it's live action? Or I'm just curious what you were driving at there.
Yeah, definitely. I think for the Academy, they like they like their dramas. They like to sit on long shots and let you think about what the character's thinking. Typical animation is not like that. Typical shots, 2 to 3 seconds, and then we move on. So I think, like for instance, the Lego Movie was not nominated for an animated, only because they probably saw that as just being a really low-level cartoon, and maybe it is. But I thought it was a wonderful piece, very creative, and I think that it definitely deserves some merit in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of accolades for writing, certainly. So, yeah, why wouldn't it have been included just for that element, for an animated piece that had excellent writing? I don't know.
Well, I mean, all these award-winning animation films have this very, very clean look, like in terms of their pictorial qualities. Like, so it's, I mean, when you look at those films, they are not messy at all. I mean, they have clean shapes. They are telling, they are always telling like moral tales, but like in a sense, you can see these characters as human beings in those films. So I don't know. I feel like maybe this is a problem of cultural sensibility. Like you have to have those human-like characters, and you have to have a certain look to be able to be selected into, this kind of ceremony.
Yeah, maybe. This actually brings up a question that I want to talk about in terms of style, animation style, and the film tone. And I'm curious about the link between those two things. In the bigger picture, for example, it's a very difficult subject. It's about aging and death. And the style of the film, that mix between the 2D paintings and the 3D stop motion, seems to reflect the somber mood, whereas something like Feast is generally upbeat. And it felt reminiscent of things like 101 Dalmatians or Toy Story. So my question is, if you're an animator and you have a particular style, does that end up limiting the kind of narratives and subject matter that you can explore in your film work? Does that dictate the kinds of films that you end up making? Yeah,
I think that's absolutely true. It's the analogy I like to think of it as Leonardo DiCaprio. He was this and then luckily he was able to kind of bounce that whole persona out of who we perceive him as, and he became something of a real actor, right? And I think that can be said. I mean, because as an animation director, there's going to be a particular style that we are interested in, that we like to produce, and because of that, we will be typecast to be creating a certain type of film, and that kind of follows us through our careers. For myself, I've been trying to change the way my films look, so that way there are moments where I can create a drama or I can create a comedy. But overall, I have an appeal for 3D animation, and 3D animation is going to look a little more commercial, which will appeal to a certain audience. Whereas if you are using charcoal, as your main source of media, it's going to then also limit you because you have a lack of colors. You can't really, create a comedy, so to speak, with the lack of color palette. So I mean, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult in that way. So I think you're on that. And you
don't worry ever. I mean, I almost just wonder if the type of person that then is attracted to charcoal already didn't want to make comedies, that's like very oversimplifying the process, but I almost wonder if it doesn't matter because you got attracted to that medium for your own reasons. And I don't know, I had never even really considered it before watching these very different films stylistically. So maybe one last question here before we wrap up. We have a lot of adult sitcoms now that are animated, right? The Simpsons and Family Guy. But it does seem like feature-length films that are animated, at least those screened in the U.S., I realize that this isn't true everywhere, are still made by and large for children. So it's tough to tell when it comes to animated shorts, and particularly these animated shorts, if they're supposed to be children's stories or if they're meant for a mature audience, or what kind of audience any of these short films would be meant for anyway. I don't know. Did you guys have thoughts about that when you were watching this?
Well, I think that the Oscars in general, right? It's not kid oriented. So I would imagine that all of the shorts that get chosen here are more of at least mid-range, if not adult oriented animation exercise. Like, I just can't imagine. I think I keep remembering the animated documentary Waltz with Bashir that I think won the best documentary several years ago. And that just kind of like blew everything out of the water because it was it's like, oh, it's an animated documentary that's incredibly moving, But I think that's like the only one I can remember like just coming to my head right now that just appeared in this other category that kind of seemed like an aberration almost. But yeah, all of these shorts seem like way too dark to be kid oriented. I don't know. Really?
Because I feel this category is specifically designed to select children-oriented animation shorts. In a sense, I mean, they are not dealing with the problem directly. They also, I mean, even if they are touching, adult issues, they do it in a offhanded or indirect way. So, I mean, in that sense, it is easier for children to consume these films. So I don't know. I feel like they more or less seem to be childish for me.
Peter, do you look like you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, well, we always like to think that we create animation that we want to see. And I think that is the case. They're very mature themes. But, kids will watch anything that's moving on the screen. Yeah. It's got bright colors. They'll watch it. I mean, I early on, I made 3 dramas because I thought I'd make 3 dramas as short films. I've screened them in my sister's elementary school. I mean, they're real dark. The kid kills his dad. They loved it. They understood it. They loved it. They're like, wow, let's watch it again.
I identify with this.
Yeah.
Look out, Dad. Yeah.
Yeah. So kids,
well, very legit.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll end there. Watch out for your children, your own children. They're coming for you. Once again, the Oscar nominees for Best Animated Shorts open at Film Scene this Friday, January 30th. For a complete list of showtimes, check out Film Scene's website, icfilmscene.org. If you're interested in seeing film that challenges, inspires, educates, and entertains in downtown Iowa City, please check out Film Scene and Film Scene's website, icfilmscene.org. To learn more about the Bijou Film Board's unique and long-standing role in the exhibition of provocative and engaging cinema in Iowa City, please check out bijou.uiowa.edu. You've been listening to Bijou Banter. Catherine, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Changmin, it's a pleasure as always.
Likewise.
And Peter, we're so happy you joined us today.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks.
I'm Leah, and I look forward to more banter next week.